What is slavery? Why did it exist in America? Slavery is a social, economic system whereby one person can own another person. In the 1600s, when English settlers began to colonize America, the demand for workers increased, especially in the southern colonies, where large farms grew cotton and tobacco. To meet the demand for workers, the colonies instituted slavery. Over a period of almost 200 years, people were taken from their homes in Africa. After being captured, they were chained, put on ships, and brought to America. A trip on a slave ship was a terrifying experience. The trip took weeks or months, with hundreds of people crammed below deck. Many died on the journey across the Atlantic Ocean. Those that survived became enslaved. An enslaved person is someone who is owned by and works without pay for another person. Men, women, and children were forced to work endless hours, day after day. Enslaved people had no personal freedoms at all. They had no rights. Slavery was very cruel, and the life of an enslaved person was not a happy one.
Boy, I know you ain't trying to slack off out here, is you?
No, sir. No, sir. No, sir.
Well, you better get to picking. Master says we got to get this cotton picked before sundown. Now get a move on.
Yes,
all of you.
Yes, sir, master. Yes, sir.
Well, I put the lash to you myself.
Many enslaved people did not have enough to eat or decent clothes to wear. That's why so many enslaved people dreamed of being free. In 1776, there were 13 British colonies in America, and most allowed slavery. However, when the colonies started a war for independence against Great Britain, the colonies in the North, from New Jersey to what is today Maine, began to end slavery. In the southern states, things were different. By 1850, there were about 4 million enslaved people living in the southern states. Cotton was an important crop in the South. It took lots of workers to grow and harvest cotton. Enslaved people provided the manpower to get the work done. Slavery was important to the plantation owners and the Southern economy. A plantation is a large farm where tobacco, sugar, or cotton was grown. Most Southerners didn't want slavery to end. Americans, both black and white, began organizing and speaking out against slavery. The people who wanted to get rid of or abolish slavery were called abolitionists. It is believed that the Underground Railroad began in 1781. That's when abolitionists began to organize a system for hiding and aiding runaway enslaved people. By 1850, there were 3,000 workers on the Underground Railroad helping escaped enslaved people on their treacherous journey to the free states in the North and Canada. The Underground Railroad was a series of homes, barns, and churches called stations. Stations were the places runaways could hide. People who ran the stations were called station masters. Some people were called conductors. Conductors were people who supplied the passengers or enslaved people with maps and other things they would need for their journey north. Typically, stations were about 20 miles apart. Some conductors hid passengers in wagons or carts with false bottoms to travel from one station to another. Runaways usually hid during the day. It was safer to travel under the darkness of night. They could recognize a station by brightly lit candles or lanterns positioned in the front yard. There they knew they could find help. Working or traveling on the Underground Railroad was dangerous. For runaway enslaved people, there was always the danger of slave catchers. Slave catchers would hunt for the escaping enslaved people with dogs. Slave catchers made money by catching and returning enslaved people to their owners. If they were captured, their owners often beat or killed the runaways to discourage others from trying to escape. Working on the Underground Railroad became against the law in 1850 when Congress passed the Fugitive Slave Act. Anyone aiding or hiding runaways would have to pay a steep fine or be put in jail. Helping enslaved people was now illegal. But nothing stopped the Underground Railroad. Tens of thousands of enslaved people journeyed to freedom. A businessman named Thomas Garrett became a very famous station master. He lived in the slave state of Delaware. There, he turned his home in Wilmington into the last station on the Underground Railroad. It was the last stop before enslaved people reached freedom in Pennsylvania. Garrett helped more than 2,000 enslaved people to freedom. One of the most famous and important conductors of the Underground Railroad was a former enslaved person, Harriet Tubman. Harriet Tubman made it to freedom on the Underground Railroad and then made many secret trips back to the South to lead more than 300 enslaved people to freedom. There were many routes to freedom on the Underground Railroad. But how did enslaved people learn about it? How did they know which way to go? The answer is secret codes. Some codes were found in songs. The lyrics in a song called "Follow the Drinking Gourd" referred to the Big Dipper constellation in the bright North Star. The lyrics provided directions on how to get north. Depending on where they lived, it could take over a year for a runaway to make it to the Mason-Dixon line to freedom. The Mason-Dixon line was the boundary line between Virginia and Pennsylvania. Some enslaved people traveled by themselves, others in small groups. Even some families risked their lives to escape slavery. By 1861, tensions and differences between the North and the South became so great that the Southern states wanted to secede or separate from the rest of the country. Both sides went to war. It was known as the Civil War. During the war, President Abraham Lincoln signed the Emancipation Proclamation. Emancipation means to set free. The Emancipation Proclamation set all enslaved people free. After that, the war was fought not only to unite the country, but to put an end to slavery too. Then, in 1865, the 13th Amendment to the United States Constitution ended slavery in America. The battle to end slavery in America was difficult and dangerous, but thanks to the courage of many men and women, both black and white, America's journey through slavery finally came to an end.